chào tất cả các bạn. Mình là Thảo, mình đến từ Trung tâm Sáng tạo và Động tạo trường Đại học Ngoại thương. Để tiếp nối ngày hôm qua với việc F-Talk Startup 4.0 From Zero to CEO, ngày hôm nay trung tâm FIIS tổ chức một buổi giao lưu trực tiếp với anh Tony Trần, là CEO của Alfa Enzo. Ngày hôm nay ngay bây giờ các bạn hãy cùng comment dưới post này, dưới livestream này để có thể gửi tới anh Tony Trần những câu hỏi và được giải đáp thắc mắc ngay lập tức. Vâng, và trong lúc chờ đợi các bạn gửi câu hỏi thì em muốn hỏi anh Tony Trần trước là sau sự kiện ngày hôm qua thì không biết hiện tại anh đang có cảm xúc như thế nào?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I'm just so proud of all the students that have made it, and the energy was definitely felt in the entire space. I think the entire auditorium, the entire stage actually is just so energetic and so vibrant, and it's such a strong example of kind of the emotions that are happening right now. Yeah, go ahead.
So, vâng, và okay. Vậy là rất cảm ơn anh Tony Trần ngày hôm qua đã có mặt tại sự kiện, và em nghĩ là cái sự có mặt của anh Tony sẽ là một cái niềm cảm hứng rất là lớn cho các bạn sinh viên. Thế thì được biết thì anh Tony Trần, CEO startup của anh đang làm về một công nghệ đúng không ạ? Em đang làm về một mạng xã hội. Vâng, vậy thì bọn em muốn hỏi là ở thời điểm hiện tại các bạn hỏi rất nhiều về startup 4.0, đó là tên gọi của chương trình. Tuy nhiên thì những cái ứng dụng về blockchain hay là AI đều là những cái rất là xa lạ. Vậy thì trong buổi hôm nay em có thể cho các bạn một cái lời giải thích ngắn gọn mà nó dễ hiểu nhất thì các bạn có thể tiếp cận được với blockchain, công nghệ blockchain không ạ?
Blockchain, AI also? Okay. These are all some of the biggest topics and the most and the trendiest topic of current times. And so to begin, let's talk about blockchain. What blockchain really is just a way to ensure that data is essentially stays the same from place to place across all of the across the wires, right? And so what blockchain does is it allows for data to be securitized, privatized, and what's interesting about it is that it has a governance layer. And so if you think about kind of how the web works today, when you send data over the wires, you are never 100% guaranteed that whatever the data that you sent over the wire is going to be 100%, right? And so that's the key. Back in 2008, either a gentleman or group by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, he proposed a number of different ways in which we can ensure the accuracy of content. And so what he proposed was to create a series of essentially blocks. And really, blockchain is not a bunch of blocks tied together. That's not really the right way to think about it. It basically is, you would think about it in a very simpler way, a spreadsheet that is shared across everybody who has it. And you can put content in all the cells of this spreadsheet. When one person changes this content in one cell, everybody else has this copy, and so they can also see this change. Where this is most interesting is that you can now add different kinds of data together, and you can ensure that it stays the same. And in particular, one use case for it is, of course, money. And so, when you have essentially a clear account of record that you can always go back to, and that everybody knows that is the exact value, you can ensure that if you change the value, everybody knows, right? And that's what blockchain is. But what blockchain is interesting is that the governance layer is now not centralized in one part. And so in other words, there's nobody managing these spreadsheets that are on everybody's machine. These spreadsheets are basically self-governed by the act of these mining softwares, right? And so, so Bitcoin is one of the few projects that actually has a real working product in blockchain technology, and how each of the data is recorded is done by these miners, and it creates a reward for these miners that expend computing resources to make updates or make changes to this share spreadsheet, which we can think of it as a shared ledger, right? And so that's the essence of what blockchain is. It's not really a bunch of blocks chained together. It really is more like a shared ledger that has just maybe a word for it would be maybe automatic accounting for it. And then the other topic is AI. AI is a deeply integrated field right now. It's a field that a lot of people are interested in. Not a lot of people understand what AI is. And when we think about AI, there's really two components to AI. And it all basically is a digital variation of what we do every single day. And that is learning and inference. So, for example, how do you come to learn something, right? What you do is basically you take a large set of data, and you run that through a mental model, right? And that's what learning is. So, for example, you see a cat many different times in that particular shape and size that would be a cat. You come to label it, and now it's known as a cat, right? And so what you did mentally was basically take a large quantity of data, and you run it through a model, and you give it a label. And so in computing, what people are doing is they're taking a large set of data, and they're running it through a particular model so that the computer would know how to identify that next time. And so after you learn that something is a cat, you now know that something that looks just like that with those qualities is called a cat, right? And so that's the learning aspect. And then the other part is inference, right? And so now after you learn, the next time you see something that looks like a cat, you can then say, well, that must be a cat. And that's inference, which is very useful for predicting what's coming, right? And so those are the two parts that is of most interest to the world right now, whereby we know that we have a vast quantity of data that exists out there. How do we run it through all of these different models in order to provide better inferences for stuff that we are going to do? For example, when you post something on, when you write something in a Google feed, for example, right, or the Google search bar, how does it know what you're going to search for? How does it read ahead? Well, it knows because the computer helped it figure it out. And how it figures out is by taking this entire set of all the patterns and all the things that people are searching for and giving you, and predicting what you're about to do. And it is incredibly useful for what we really want to do, which is at the current state of the world, people are increasingly wanting to work more and more in the future. And in fact, this is one aspect that Alfa Enzo is really focused on right now, is how do we make effective use of the future as if it were today. And if you look at the Alfa Enzo project, you can actually see that we can give you that really interesting ability.
Cảm ơn câu sự giải thích của anh Tony. Bởi vì là em nghĩ là cái spreadsheet hay là Google Spreadsheet là một sản phẩm mà các bạn sinh viên sử dụng rất là nhiều. Tuy nhiên thì mình tìm được sự tương đồng với hai cái thì đó là một cái quan sát rất là hay. Có một câu hỏi khác cũng về blockchain và cụ thể hơn là về mạng xã hội của anh. Bạn ấy hỏi là bài toán khó nhất về blockchain là để giải bài toán transaction per second, điều mà Bitcoin đang bị hạn chế. Vậy thì anh nghĩ mạng xã hội của anh làm sao có thể tiến ra thị trường toàn cầu được với bài toán này?
Okay, that's a great question. But first, before I answer that though, I just want to say that TPS is transaction per second. TPS is very important for all blockchain type of projects, but it's not yet a problem. It's not yet a problem. A lot of blockchain projects are rushing to solve for transaction per second, But we don't really have that bottleneck. You know, not a whole ton of people are using Bitcoin for day-to-day transactions. So basically, what all these projects are doing is basically seeing a potential for problems and are now out there trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. That's what I would have to say about that. But how do we solve the transaction per second problem? Many years ago, well, not too many years ago, just 2 years ago, when we began down this path and began to build this project on top of a blockchain ecosystem, what we thought was, how can we create an experience whereby you know, it would be the same as me taking money out of my wallet and handing it to you in real life, right? So it would be that simple. There is no delay there. It's not like I'm taking money to a bank and then the bank gives you back that money. Then there would be a huge delay. And so how could we solve for something like that? And one of the theory that I had at the time was, why don't we create basically a new way to look at blockchain? Why don't we give everybody their own blockchain and to use other kinds of technologies to allow for us to transact between our two respective blockchains, which actually what the current kind of blockchain technologies that exist out there now, they're calling that a sidechain. So essentially that's what we have, is to, you can increase the throughput of a main chain by allowing for off-chain transactions. So off-chain transactions meaning what? When the government produces money, all right, and they give that to a bank, for example, and then it ends up in your wallet, the transactions that we do between each other, that's off the main chain, right? And so, you know, what we do between our individual wallets, the banks doesn't need to know that, right? And so that's kind of the thinking that we're working on right now. And there are some other kinds of thinking that I won't go into too much detail because it's just a lot. But you can go ahead and read our white paper that exists on alfaenzo.io. It gives you a more detailed outlook of how we're looking to solve the TPS issue.
Các bạn có thể lên trang web alfaenzo.io để có thể tìm hiểu kỹ hơn về những gì mà anh Tony Trần và cả công ty đang làm. Vâng, tiếp theo có một câu hỏi nữa, em nghĩ là nó không có liên quan nhiều lắm đến công nghệ, nhưng mà nó khá liên quan đến câu hỏi khá là cá nhân. Người ta thường nói là khởi nghiệp đi kèm với sự cô đơn. Vậy thì trong quá trình khởi nghiệp có lúc nào anh Tony thực sự cảm nhận được điều đấy không ạ?
Yes, all the time. Actually, you know, I've had some pretty tough times in my life. As I had mentioned during the Zero to CEO event yesterday, and you know, a number of different, and it was that hardship that I experienced that actually kind of helped me through these dark, lonely marches. But oftentimes, when we're on the startup path, we are faced with incredible difficulties that exist, right? You're not sure if your project is going to succeed. You're spending money to build a project with no guarantees. So it's, you know, you definitely do feel these lonely marches at night. But there is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, don't feel dejected, and don't feel like you're not going to be able to see that light to the end of the tunnel. Because what is remarkable about having the spirit of an entrepreneur is actually to continue on, right? And we call that grit. Grit is what makes companies great, what makes founders great, is that ability to not give up until you actually make it. You know, there's so many different times in my life and throughout my startup journey whereby I just have no idea what would be. But you know, if you fall and you stumble and you don't get up, you're a loser. And so that's the one thing that I want to reaffirm, is that as long as you keep on going, it's like the bike example that I talked about yesterday. It's like riding a bike. How do you learn to ride a bike? Well, you basically fail until you don't have any other way to fail, and then you basically learn. And there's there's a really interesting saying, a quote that I've recently learned, that, you know, in order to ride a bike, you have to face forward. And that's what you have to do as entrepreneurs. Keep on facing forward, keep on falling, but getting back up and fighting for what you feel is a solution to the world. It's not about money, it's about what you can add to the startup ecosystem. And it's about your own personal journey. And, you know, if this journey turns out good, well, that's perfect. If it doesn't turn out good, well, find something else, you know. What, at the end of the day, it's life. That's what it is. Don't be thinking about success and life as two separate, different things. Successes and life are basically one and the same. If you fail, you've learned something so that you can take it to the next path of your life. And one of these paths is going to lead to success. I can guarantee you. Nobody fails forever. You fail forever, you'd be homeless, you'd be out there begging for money. If you guys that are listening here, none of you will be like that. So, you know, and if you are like that, think about what I'm saying. You know, if you're down and out and you have nothing to call on, well, you should still be able to call on yourself, the experience that you have gained, and be able to get yourself out of any situation. So that's what I would advise.
Cảm ơn lời khuyên của anh Tony, và thực sự thì em ngồi đây nghe cũng cảm thấy rất là mừng vì
You're not gonna cry, are you?
No.
Okay.
Có một câu hỏi khác, nó sẽ muốn xin lời câu hỏi này muốn xin lời khuyên của anh về hành trình của startup của các startup ở Silicon Valley, thì với hành trình đó thì các startup ở Việt Nam có thể học hỏi được gì không?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Anh Tuấn Việt trai ơi, anh có thể chia sẻ thêm về hành trình mà các startup ở Việt Nam có thể học hỏi từ các startup trưởng thành từ Silicon Valley được không ạ?
You know, that's a really, really good question, and I've been asked this a lot as of late. And there are many, many different things to learn from startups that exist out there. But the best way to really build startups is to look at great examples of startups that already exist and emulate them. You know, you feel like you can take on the transportation problem. Go ahead and copy Uber, right? Uber has, you know, Uber, Lyft, Grab, they can all compete with each other for very, very, for the reason that, you know, for the end user, it doesn't matter what brand you are. What matters is that you get your cab or your taxi or, you know, your motorcycle or your ride in the next 5 minutes. And that's how these companies are so able to compete so competitively with each other. And there's always going to be room for, you know, either a niche player to come in and overtake any key markets, right? And so definitely there's a lot to learn. I think there's a lot to learn in the way that startups in the West basically frame the problem and arrive at a solution. And there are a number of different graphs that you could take. You know, start looking at the mass adoption or you know the adoption curve, for example. Looking at that, looking at various different ways in which startups are evaluating their ideas and emulating from there. But definitely, all the startups out there are basically you can create them here. And so I would advise you to begin to go out there and just, you know, subscribe to Crunchbase, for example, and get a feed of what all the hot startups are at present moment, and see if that's going to be a good fit for you. If that's a problem you're passionate enough to go after, and if you are, go after it. Go build a prototype, an MVP, and get to it. And that's what I would say. There's lots to learn.
Có một câu hỏi nữa là liên quan đến việc khi mà các startup bắt đầu khởi nghiệp của họ, thì câu hỏi bằng tiếng Anh em sẽ bắt đầu nhé. The early stage startup doesn't have money for marketing or attracting users for new apps, for example. Then so what should they do to attract people?
Attract people as in investors?
Yes. No, I mean maybe like attract the users for the app because they don't have money for marketing.
The one thing that's remarkable about the ecosystem that we're living in is definitely well, that's actually a two-sided question. If you don't have money, you should definitely try to raise money because you know, funding is the lifeblood of a startup. You run out of funding, you're dead. But definitely raise money. And how do you raise money? Well, you raise money by providing proof. That you actually understand the market very well, and it's the same way that you would convince somebody else of an idea, right? And so get them to basically invest or vest into your idea, and then you'll be able to get the fund. And even if you don't have funds, you can actually attract a fair number of people to your users. I mean, everybody in Vietnam right now, they're all very, they've got their eyes on startups, right? And there are systems that just springing up because everybody just wants to wake up and start to tackle these big markets, right? Technology is at a point where you can easily build an app, you can easily build a website. Why not go out there and start fishing like everybody else? But the key is, what you can do to attract users without funding is to just go back to what people have always done in terms of attracting users. Do it one part at a time. If you're starting your startup in a small town, get all those people involved, because those people will know other people, right? How does Facebook allow for you to connect with 500 people that you don't even know? Well, it's word of mouth. I mean, they basically use an algorithm to find the people that are closest to you. But if you're doing it manually, then you just go you win a small group of people at a time, and part of those people are going to be people that might invest in your business. I mean, if you look at how Alfa Enzo raised money, or how my previous companies have been able to raise money, is I begin telling people about my idea, and I work really hard to get my idea together first on paper, get friends and family interested. I would then go and show everybody that I knew. I'm selling the project to everybody. So that's another lesson to be had, is ABS. Always be selling, okay? If you've got an idea, if you're passionate about it, everywhere you go, you should be talking about your project. You're in a taxi, hey, did you hear about Alfa Enzo? I've got this app that can let you time travel, So definitely go sell. And along the way, you're gonna get to a point where two things happen. First is that the feedback that you get from people as you're telling them about your idea comes back to you and you're like, wait a minute, my idea is really good, or I don't know, something's wrong with my idea, people are not liking it too much. It helps you validate your idea. That's number one. Number two, if your idea is really good, they will be like, wow, that's excellent. It will make you feel good, it will add to your passion bank. Right, and you need that on those lonely marches at night. From the previous question, you're gonna need as much energy as possible. And when somebody reacts very positively to your idea, it's not money, but it's energy that you can actually spend, and that's just as good as money. I would say it's better than money at some point, right? Because you need energy to make money. And then so you just do that manually until you get to somewhere where you feel like, okay, wow, this huge group of people near me loves my idea. Maybe I should ask them to introduce me to people who have money to invest in my idea. And if that person can, maybe the next person that they introduce you to. And if you do that maybe 5 or 6 times, you might reach somebody who has the money to invest in you. They say 6 degrees of separation, right? That means that between you and the president, all you need is 6 introductions, right? And so there are 6 degrees of separation separating you from anybody on this planet if you just make the right connections. And so, that's what you do.
Khi mà anh vừa chia sẻ thì nó liên quan tới cái lời khuyên của anh nói là đừng không biết cho idea, hãy chia sẻ tất cả. Có một câu hỏi khác cũng bằng tiếng Anh. Hi Tony, I was surprised by your story of starting up from zero and then become a CEO for 4 times. I think in addition to determination, persistence, and talent, a wise and dedicated mentor is significant for startup success. Did you meet someone like that? If yes, can you share your story and what you have learned from them? How it changed your life?
My best mentor is actually YouTube. I spent a lot of time just looking up interviews with people, looking up interviews with as many people that I know as possible, in order to kind of adopt the kinds of mentality that great people are built by, and that's one thing. You just, for me, it was see, I'm always inspired by people that are out there, and what I do is everything that I learn from either YouTube or from somebody, I add that to my list of people that I know. For example, I once saw YouTube about Elon Musk talking about first principle thinking, the importance of first principle thinking, and how you can use first principle thinking to decipher whether your idea is actually a game-changing idea or it's just, it's a weak idea, right? And so now I go around and I talk about first principle thinking all the time. I didn't invent that. Elon Musk talks about that. I don't know if he invented it, right? But we are all standing on the shoulders of giants, and we should continue to do that. And so, have I ever met anybody that have truly changed my mind? That's the unfortunate thing with my life, is that so much of what I've had to do, I've had to do myself. And for all of you out there who feel like, man, I have to meet this amazing angel that will, tell me the meaning of life. That's not happening. There is no magic bullet. You have to go out there and you have to put your elbow grease to it. You have to put in the hard work. And if there's nobody teaching you, you should be at least teaching yourself. And that's the magic of the world that we live in now, is that you don't have to go 50 miles to get a book. You just go online and search on YouTube, and everything that you hear. If you hear something amazing, write that down. Add that to your repertoire. Tomorrow, try to repeat exactly what you've heard so that it becomes a part of your vocabulary. And then you do that enough, 50 times, maybe 100 times. You will then begin to create your own. You begin to add your own realization to it, and that's how you develop perspective. Perspective is not something where you're born with. Baby doesn't come out and just say, "Man, I've got this awesome perspective." No, it doesn't do that. It's about gathering all this knowledge and then beginning to develop based on your own vision of what's around you. And vision is not, man, I see the future. No, that's not what vision is. Vision is taking your perspective and your observation, adding those two together is what creates vision. And so that's what I would say.
Vừa nãy thì mình có nói khá là nhiều về khi mà thất bại thì mình phải học này, mình tiếp tục. Mình học từ thất bại, mình học từ rất nhiều nguồn khác nhau. Nhưng mà từ bản thân em là một sinh viên và em cũng biết nhiều các bạn khác, phương pháp học lại là một chuyện khác. Tức là mình biết là mình phải học và mình cần học từ những thứ này, nhưng mà làm thế nào để học và học như thế nào hay gọi là how to learn how to learn là một vấn đề rất là khác. Lúc đầu câu chuyện em có nghe anh nói về mental models, thì không biết là anh có thể chia sẻ thêm về cái lĩnh vực này không ạ? Em nghĩ là một vấn đề nó khá là quan trọng trong việc learning.
Yes, it is. One thing that's helped me is initially, so for a long time I was in the dark, and of course, as I just mentioned, I didn't have anyone that actually came to me and bring me out of this darkness, and so I had to spend a lot of my time bringing myself out of the darkness. And through that, the first thing that I learned is the kind of learner that I am. There are several types of learners. Some people are visual learner. Some people learn by doing, right? Some people learn, by basically experiences. Some people can learn very well just by listening. And so you have to understand what makes you learn best. And so that's the first thing. For me, it was about visualizing and developing these different models in which I can look at a graph or I can look at a market and begin to visualize all of the components in that market. So that's because I'm a visual learner. And then the second aspect of that is mental models, is to basically and everybody does this. You don't have to be any kind of special learner, or you don't need supremely high IQ to be able to do this. But you should always be developing various different observations and creating interesting models from those observations. So, you know, if you see something and you feel like, wow, you know, that's a really interesting concept. You know, how does it fit into everything that I'm doing? How does it fit into my experiences, and how does it fit into the kind of markets that I'm looking at? And so from there, you'll be able to develop basically some perspectives, and that mental models really gives you that. And so that's how, you know, that's what I would say about mental models.
Để tiếp nối cái câu hỏi vừa rồi thì anh còn nói nhiều về góc nhìn perspective.
Yes.
Thông thường thì các bạn khi mà mình có một cái nói đến cái first order thinking á,
Yeah.
thì thông thường khi mà mình có một cái quan niệm về vấn đề gì đấy thì thường rất khó để mình có thể thay đổi nó.
Yeah.
Đấy là do vì sao mà họ có rất nhiều những cái gọi là định kiến.
Yeah.
Vậy thì không biết anh có thể chia sẻ về cái quá trình anh đã thay đổi cái góc nhìn đấy của anh như thế nào và điều gì đã đến nó nhiều nhất?
There are several interesting things. The first is, you know, if you're at school right now, whether you are at FTU or another university, you are in school to develop perspective, right? So if you're looking to start up, or if you're looking to do anything in your life, don't let a second go by that while you are in school, to let that be just a repetition of what you've observed, because you're not really learning. Learning is about developing perspective, and to develop perspective, the number one thing, the most important thing that has helped me so much, and this part I would implore, and thank you for the excellent question, I would implore that you learn how to connect the dots. That's the key thing. Whatever it is that you're learning right now has some sort of relevance to something else that you already know. You start to connect those dots together, and once you connect enough dots together, you will develop a very, very powerful perspective that is a combination of what you have learned, but also a combination of what's coming from internally, right? What's internal to you. And that's very, very key. So learn to connect the dots. You go out there and you hear something good, how does that relate to something else, right? Or you learn a new math formula. Just look around you. Where is that math formula being applied? And, you know, and just basically apply that math formula out there. That's how you really develop perspective. Oh no, I'm good. I've got my best friend here, water. Aquafina, but this is not a commercial, so.
Em thấy là mình trả lời rất nhiều câu hỏi và các câu hỏi thì đều rất là thể hiện sự quan tâm rất là lớn các bạn trẻ về startup và về học tập. Vậy thì có một câu hỏi nữa rất đặc trưng của các bạn thương, là trong bối cảnh của những ngành công nghiệp chú trọng vào vấn đề sở hữu trí tuệ thì công nghệ blockchain có thể mang lại những cơ hội như thế nào cho các doanh nghiệp trong đăng ký và bảo hộ tài sản trí tuệ?
Wow, that's a lot of big Vietnamese words.
Okay.
I've got kind of weak vocabulary. I'm honest. Come on.
Translate it.
Yeah, you can go a little bit slower. That might help. That was a great question.
So it's about the.
Oh no, you can just say it in Vietnamese but slower.
Okay. Hiện tại thì các ngành công nghiệp thì đều rất chú trọng vào việc vấn đề sở hữu trí tuệ. Vậy thì công nghệ blockchain có thể giúp thế nào cho việc các doanh nghiệp có thể đăng ký và bảo hộ tài sản trí tuệ của họ?
So blockchain technology actually has, you know, it's not meant to be patented. It's, you know, the whole premise of blockchain technology is to put things in everybody's hands, right? And to give that power back. But if you have invented something that, you know, and we know that all the major companies are basically, you know, creating all these blockchain patents. If you have a brand new idea that you believe are, you know, has not been seen before, the best way to do that is just to get some level of provisional patent, but it's more important for you to actually execute on that idea. Because ideas are 1 in a million, and you can't really patent an idea. You have to first prove your idea out there. And you know, patents are not as important as actually executing on your idea. Am I answering the question properly?
Rồi, chắc là mình sẽ sang một câu hỏi tiếp theo. Câu hỏi tiếp theo bạn ấy hỏi về là ngoài mô hình về ứng dụng công nghệ và xây dựng sản phẩm dựa trên công nghệ trên bao nhiêu đấy có đó, thì anh có thể nhìn thấy những cơ hội nào cho startup Việt nữa?
Okay. That's a really good question, and I've got a ton of ideas. As anyone close to me might have told you, my ideas just continue to stream. But there is an incredible opportunity to work with the niche layer of everything that's in Vietnam, right? And so if you look at a company like Oyo, for example, this is a new multi-billion-dollar company that just popped up out of nowhere. I've only recently heard about it, and their business model is pretty interesting. You know, they basically have they basically help hotels who have lower nights. They actually pay for the renovation of those hotels or hotel or rooms in a hotel, and they help you book those rooms. And so if you look at everything that exists here in Vietnam, you can create a lot of different businesses across all these different verticals, which are all of these different sectors or different sections of, you know, from hotels to transportation. You know, across all these different layers, you can actually create wonderful businesses. If you look at, let's say, you know, if you see hotels rooms being underutilized, right? How can you create something that makes it easier for people in Vietnam to go visit or stay at those hotels? What's preventing them from staying, right? Hotels that are lower on their budget, they don't have time to write reviews. They don't have time to, you know, submit themselves online. There can be really amazing businesses that just write reviews. You know, you can create a startup that basically just specializes in sending people out to experiences and writing a review. The hotels will pay for that, right? That would be one interesting aspect. Another interesting aspect is basically the vast array of communications and of transportation that exists out there. You know, there might be some possibilities for you to help soundproof a home. I mean, I don't think I've been in a hotel where you don't hear all the noise coming from the roads, right? So there's an incredible opportunity for somebody to maybe see from raw materials here in Vietnam how to create soundproof barriers that could just be as simple as a curtain, right? You can sell that, right? To hotels, to people that live on the street. Everybody lives on nothing, right? So I mean, and there's a ton of sound coming from that. I mean, people have gotten used to that, but wait until they get used to a silent home. They would love that. Or you know, so maybe you could figure out a way to manufacture those things. And one other aspect that I think I've been observing is that Vietnam is so much alike the economies in China, so you know, like in Shenzhen, and so there's amazing opportunities for hardware type of startup to pop up here because there's definitely strong engineering in Vietnam. It's incredible, but so many big companies are, you know, looking at Vietnam right now. And so you know that's a huge testament to the age level, right, of all of the people in Vietnam, which is 30.4, and the engineering talents that exist here. So that's one. Another opportunity is that Vietnamese people are very good at math, right? And you know where one thing that you can apply mathematics to is games. You know, start building Flappy Birds type of games. You know, get people addicted, and build interesting games that get people that makes people fall in love with. And these are simple little things that you can do. And so I would recommend you emulate the kinds of lifestyle that exists in Vietnam. Small, but a lot of volume. And that's where all of the opportunities are actually here in Vietnam. So definitely utilize local vision, but then think about how that might be applied to global, to the global market.
Cảm ơn rất là nhiều. Em có thể muốn hỏi thêm rất là một câu hỏi cuối cùng. Hiện tại thì bản thân chương trình này hay là sự kiện F-Shop hay là rất nhiều chương trình khác nó cũng đặt ở trong cái hệ sinh thái mà hệ sinh khởi nghiệp mà nhà trường này và chính phủ giúp đỡ các bạn học sinh rất là nhiều. Vậy thì không biết là anh có lời khuyên cuối cùng nào để các bạn có thể chấp lấy cơ hội này và tận dụng những cái nguồn lực đấy để có thể phấn đấu, để có thể grow nhiều công trong tương lai không ạ?
The current state of both Vietnam's adoption of technology and the general momentum that students that I've seen I saw it in their eyes, and I saw it in the energy that they were projecting. They love startup. I mean, this is definitely startup country, and this is definitely the right time to start up. There's no better time, because technology have reached the point where now it's very easy to build an app. It's very easy to build a website. You should be out there building something, right? And the last thing you should be building is another banh mi shop. You know, you don't want, you should be spending your resources to building things that improve the lives of your neighbors, the lives of the people that are all around you, because there is definitely a lot to support. Vietnam is a big country, and it's a country that is trying to reach breakneck level growth, right? It's trying to just explode, and everybody here feels it, right? From our contestant in the Miss Universe pageant to our soccer team to and it's not just Vietnamese citizens that are prideful. It's Vietnamese all abroad, and so here is an opportunity to touch the lives of every Vietnamese person that exists out there. And when great things happen, who the first people that are going to support businesses that come out of Vietnam? Vietnamese people, right? And so it's the potential is here. The potential for really great growth, and the potential to create amazing businesses. That's all right here. And you have support from your government. You have support from all the universities that are now looking at startup, because you know why? It's come to a point where there is a tremendous understanding. It's a little bit slow, but finally there's this tremendous understanding that the greatest war that is to come is going to be a war on data, right? Businesses are coming into Vietnam. They are trying to turn every Vietnamese into products. I mean, Grab Taxi could have been made by somebody from here. I mean, it's not that hard to build Grab. But why didn't it come from Vietnam? And why isn't another Grab Taxi? I think that there is another business similar to that. But there are many businesses out there that have already made it, and that is trying to Vietnam. I mean, somebody could build a TikTok here in Vietnam. I mean, it's not that difficult. And even if you have to copy it exactly as that, the thing is, as you begin to develop, let's say for example, you want to make TikTok for Vietnam. Copy them exactly as they look, but then you know what? Along the way, you're going to be like, wait a minute, that's not something I would use. And that's when you're speaking in Vietnamese perspective. Then you start to change it. And before you know it, you'll be like, wow, I've got an app that is just like TikTok, but it's oriented for Vietnamese people. It's better for Vietnamese people to use. and that's when you have something that you can get to market. And then if it works, you might discover something that TikTok hasn't seen before, and that's your ticket to reaching out to the global market. And so opportunities are there. It's a wonderful time to not only be alive and to feel this incredible energy, but the tools are available everywhere you look. So just go out there and get it. Glory is yours. Wealth is yours. You have to be willing to go out there and reach out and get it. I mean, it's not going to come to you. There's not, you have the legs. Money doesn't.
Rất cảm ơn anh Tony về lời khuyên rất là bổ ích và rất là thiết thực ạ. Bởi vì là các bạn cũng phải thực sự ra làm, chứ không phải mình sẽ ngồi nghĩ quá nhiều, mình sẽ phải mà mình thực sự làm.
Yeah, that's right. Do you know that that statue by Rodin? It looks like this. It's the thinker statue. They call it the thinker statue. Well, that statue has been thinking for the last 80 years and it hasn't done anything. So stop thinking. Just go out there and do.
Cảm ơn anh Tony rất là nhiều về một buổi trò chuyện rất là hay. Và cũng vì một cái lời khuyên của anh Tony là các bạn hãy thực sự làm và ra để tìm cơ hội, và ở đây có rất nhiều cơ hội. Và ngay tại đây, tại trung tâm FIIS của FTU, tại phòng F101, các bạn hoàn toàn có thể tiếp cận với chương trình SIP 100 ngày ươm tạo và 1 năm kết nối đầu tư. Chương trình khởi nghiệp ươm tạo SIP 100 là chương trình đồng hành với các bạn sinh viên và các bạn trẻ từng bước xây dựng doanh nghiệp của mình dựa trên các ý tưởng kinh doanh sáng tạo. Ngoài ra, 100 ngày ươm tạo và 1 năm kết nối đầu tư cũng là giai đoạn để hoàn thiện mô hình kinh doanh, để phát triển thị trường và đánh giá hiệu quả. Cũng như anh Tony đã nói là bạn có một ý tưởng bạn mang ra ngoài, phải nói ra ngoài thì người ta mới biết là cái ý tưởng đấy nó có thực sự cần hay không, và thực sự hay hay không. Vậy thì hãy còn chần chừ nếu mà hãy không đăng ký chương trình SIP 100 của trung tâm FIIS FTU. Và ngoài ra, vì thời gian rất là có hạn nên chúng ta có thể có những câu hỏi mà anh Tony không thể giải đáp được ngay được. Vậy thì các bạn hãy gửi email tới fiis@ftu.edu.vn để có thể truyền lại câu hỏi đó và cho anh Tony, và chúng mình sẽ cố gắng giải đáp hết tất cả các câu hỏi. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều và cảm ơn Tony rất là nhiều.
Thank you. Bye.